So we're continuing the story of Mary as she conceives through the Holy Spirit, the baby Jesus, and now goes to see her cousin Elizabeth. It's a very interesting sequence of events, and it feels very momentous, certainly because we're thinking about and anticipating Christmas and the birth of Jesus, but also because we ourselves might be finding ourselves in a similar kind of time of transition. A time where there's good news and bad news, and it's all mixed up, and it kind of is up to us what we're going to do with it. Luke is a very interesting writer. He does some really interesting things when you think about the birth of Mary and the life of Elizabeth. If you're familiar with the Old Testament, you know that relationships between relatives is important to the theological narrative, that God works in families, and frequently in twins or older brother, younger brother. Might ring a bell with a few examples: Jacob and Esau, Joseph and his brothers, Sarah and Leah and Rachel. And here we have two relatives, these two cousins. And right from the beginning, their experiences of their pregnancies are twinned. Remember that? So the first thing that happens in Luke is we have the Annunciation story of how John the Baptist is conceived. And then we have Mary's Annunciation story. And then we have these two pregnant women getting together. So Luke is using something here to invite us to think about how these two stories interact with each other, how these two women might reflect transition, and also how their relationship is rooted in hope when it could profoundly be rooted in fear. So think about this thing with Elizabeth. Let's just hypothesize that Elizabeth represents the old ways, that Elizabeth's husband experiences the message that she will be pregnant even though she is much older than usually women are when they get pregnant. He gets the message from the angel in the temple, and he is told these things, and whatever it is that triggers him to seem doubtful silences him. He is silenced so that he has to convey the message of this coming pregnancy by writing it. Then we have the story of Mary, and she receives this message. He is from an established family in Israel. He is an established member of the religious order. And then there's Mary over here in the middle of nowhere in Podunk, tiny town, getting told by an angel that she's going to have a baby. And she's not even really marriageable age yet. She's just engagement age. So she's really young, very young to be getting pregnant. And she's not married. She's engaged, but she's not married. You see this kind of difference, right? You see this kind of potential messaging that Luke might be saying of things are about to shift. Things are about to shift in the way God is working in the world. Well, think about these two women. Okay, so they get this story, and when they get together, there's this incredible potency, right? The potency of the past and the possibilities of the future, the potency of faith of Elizabeth engaging with the faith of Mary, and the whole thing, if you see this picture up on the monitor, you get this sense of the twinning, but also the differences. And what they do together and how they respond is a choice, right? They have a choice, because if I were Elizabeth and somebody told me I was going to have a baby and I was my age or older, I would be like, not good news. Not good news. No. And if I lived at that time with the mortality rate for women having babies and I was this age, I'd be like, okay, time to get my will in order, because the odds of surviving this are really low. And the survival of my marriage might be really low too, because it takes a lot to raise a baby, and then to know that this baby is called to do things that are profound and different. Wow, I could be really, really afraid. Raise your hand if you think you could be really, really afraid if you'd gotten news like that, right? Oh my goodness. Did you know that the physiology of fear and the physiology of joy in your body feels exactly the same? That there's increased heart rate, that there's sweating, that there's this kind of lift. We just did a whole joy circle in Sunday school that Sybil referred to. You could feel the room lift. The more we went around the room and talk about our joys, you could feel this kind of energy. When I experience joy, I don't feel all that physiology, but I've been told by experts that at some level there is the same thing. And for people who have had trauma in particular, joy and fear can feel very much the same thing very quickly. And then it's a choice. Am I going to be afraid because my body is telling me something here is significant and triggering? Am I going to be afraid, or am I going to enter into gratitude and joy? If we're safe, if what's happening to us when we look at it is powerful and good, will we walk into it, or will we pull back because our body says, watch out, there's a risk? That's the choice Mary and Elizabeth had to make. And what did they do but choose joy? They came together and they celebrated. They celebrated what God was doing in their lives. Well, friends, I want to be specific right now and offer you a parallel. We have a church, and the announcements on our church can be joyful and scary. The church is in decline. People are leaving. The church is going to not be here. In 100 years, the whole country is going to be so much more secularized. Things are changing for the church. We also know that there are generations who are younger than the majority of us in the room who aren't here. And the news we hear about them is scary. The level of loneliness, the level of debt, isolation, incapacity to actually achieve adulthood because of the social norms that are pulling away that access. They're at risk. There is fear. What if we at St. Paul's, what if you in your life are called to stand together and invite joy with somebody who is younger? What if we as a community are being invited into a partnership of joy that looks different, but is full of the possibility of God working among us to do something new? We just went to the hip-hop exhibit. If you haven't been to see it, it's called The Culture at the St. Louis Art Museum, and it's free on Fridays. Really worth going to see. And spoken word and the power of words right through the visual arts and right there in the ways in which hip-hop is celebrated. And I was thinking about that this morning because essentially Elizabeth and Mary get together, and Elizabeth is so excited. She's, and. Did you notice that in the reading of the gospel? She's just really excited. And Mary steps back, and essentially she does spoken word. She speaks her faith in a unique way from Elizabeth, right? What would it look like if we had people in our congregation who did spoken word? If they expressed their faith in a way that was different from us? Could we see the fullness and possibilities of that? Would we welcome it? Would we who have lived in the old traditions be able to be like Elizabeth and say, who are we that we have lived to this moment to see this transition and see that God is at work in a change that we might not welcome, we might not be sure about, but we know God is in it. I pray that as you hear this sermon that you are also thinking in your own life about where is the old slamming up against the new and inviting you to see the holy and to step out past your fears, past your reluctance, and try to enter in to receive the joy of that moment. Whatever it is, I pray that you will do it. And as we enter in together in whatever God is calling for St. Paul's, may we continue to celebrate the joy, the peace, the love, and the holiness that God has met us here and will take us to the next step.